Well, let me begin by thanking my good colleague, Professor Chen, Tony Chen, for the kind invitation to speak and say hello to all our fine colleagues there, and also congratulate you on this 12th meeting of the IACCS. It's a splendid achievement and making a very important contribution. So just terrific, and it's really heartwarming to be part of this. So I'm going to speak briefly on the topic of moving forward with colorectal cancer screening. And so I first will make the comment that about it being a global public health issue, and with a particular focus in the Asia Pacific, something about organized screening, and then how are we doing? So here's a map from GlobalCan, that's IARC. IARC is the cancer agency of the WHO. And this map shows the Asia Pacific region, and this is for men, colorectal cancer incidence for men in cases per 100,000. And the darkest parts of the map, of course, are those that have the highest burden of disease. And here you can see, of course, Japan, and there's Singapore, Australia, New Zealand. And so if you look, so these are high burden of disease areas. And here you can see in women, the burden of disease is not as high, but the pattern is quite similar. Here you can again see Japan, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand. And so the burden of disease, as you all know, in these Asia Pacific countries is high. Now, also, if we look from another perspective and ask, of all the new cases of colorectal cancer diagnosed in a year, where do they come from? In what countries do they arise? And you can see that Asia, by far and away, is the largest proportion. Asia contributes 52% of all the new cases of colorectal cancer. North America, only just less than 10%. Europe, just over 25%. So the Asian countries are contributing more than half the cases globally, and this will only increase over time. And part of the reason that will increase, and here's a very nice slide from a paper led by Hanmo Chu, and this was in the publication, the cover of which that Professor Chen just showed. But here we see the incidence per 100,000, both sexes combined, and these are for Asian countries in red and Oceania in blue. And here you can see the Human Development Index, which is a composite index that takes into account education, income, and life expectancy. And for those countries that are highest resource countries, you can see that the burden of disease as measured by age standardized incidence is the highest. And here, of course, you can see Taiwan, Hong Kong, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore. But there's quite a spread of other countries that, while the burden of disease may not be as high as these ones in the top right-hand part of the slide, as countries undergo an economic transition, we know that the Human Development Index increases, and those countries then observe an accompanying increase in the burden of colorectal cancer. So the point being then that Asia is contributing more than half the new cases and will contribute an increasing burden going forward. So colorectal cancer screening, and mainly focusing on the fecal immunochemical test. In most countries, the target age group currently is 50 to 74, though people with no symptoms, of course. And it's fit every year or fit every 2 years. And it's colonoscopy for those with a positive fit as the next step, diagnostic step. Now, there are some countries that are using colonoscopy as the initial screening test, but there's a strong reason to go with fit. Notwithstanding that, we have 4 very large randomized controlled trials underway right now evaluating colonoscopy and compared with either usual care, no screening, or fit screening. So we have the US trial Confirm, there's a Spanish trial, ColonPrev, there's the Nordic trial, and the Swedish trial. And while we all look forward to seeing these results, which will quantitate the magnitude of benefit, it will help us understand better colonoscopy, but not clear that it's going to move us towards using colonoscopy instead of FIT. And here's the reason why. If you look at this row that says colonoscopies, if you do 100,000 colonoscopies in persons at average risk, we can estimate that you would detect about 400 persons with a cancer and about 10,000 high-risk adenomas or high-risk polyps. And while that's good, here, if you were to do the same 100,000 colonoscopies in people who are FIT positive, you will detect 8,000 cancers and 45,000 high-risk adenomas. And on the right-hand side, for using the colonoscopies in the FIT positive, you will have screened 1.8 million people, whereas using average risk screening colonoscopy by comparison, you will have screened 1,000. And I think this is really the strong bulletproof case for choosing FIT for average risk screening. Now, organized screening is important, and we know, again, that the IARC sets forth the criteria that defined organized screening. So you have a defined target population. You have to figure out a way of inviting every member of that population to screen. And in some cases, that's mailing them a letter. There has to be timely access to the screening test, quality assurance of the screening test and subsequent tests, and tracking of outcomes, which means cancer registry. The importance of organized screening is that there's greater protection against the potential limitations or harms. There should be less over-screening, like for people outside the target age group. There should be better quality because it's being measured and strengthened as one goes along. There should be better follow-up with the FIT positives, and there should be limitation or smaller number of complications. And the related concept is that screening is a process, not a test. And this slide shows nicely the various steps. You identify the target population, you have a way of inviting them or reminding them when it's time to come back for their repeat FIT. You assess them and make sure they're eligible for screening. The screening test is done, and the person is notified of the results and the screening program. And then they're recalled if the test is negative, and if it's a FIT positive, then they go on colonoscopy. So to pull all this together, you really need an information system. And when you look at organized screening programs around the world, regardless of which country or which jurisdiction you're looking at, you'll virtually always see an information system that has been built to pull all of these steps in the screening process together. Well, here's this slide just shows a picture of our own. The system is, the IT system is called InScreen. And for the colorectal screening program, we have a population-wide database. It's a single payer system. We have all hospital records. We have the FIT kit results. We have the physician billings. We have our cancer registry, and we have all the results from the colonoscopy. So all of that and more goes into the IT system, and that allows us to send our letters of invitation to the target age group to evaluate and publicly report on the program, and also our various scientific publications. And so again, regardless of whether you look to Taiwan or you look to the Netherlands or Ontario, you'll see this kind of an IT infrastructure and the ability to assess the program and report on its performance. So it takes a long time to actually plan, pilot, and implement a colorectal screening program. It's estimated to take at least a decade. And then it's an additional number of years before one can actually know and measure and report on the full impact of the program. So it's quite a process. So how are we doing in terms of implementation? Well, a few years ago, the EU decided to do a stock taking of their 3 cancer screening programs. And as far as colorectal screening was concerned, they mapped out the various countries in the EU to show which countries were in the process of rolling out a population-based program, which had rolled them out completely, which had rollout ongoing, which were piloting, which were in planning, not yet rolling out, which were regional rather than population-based, and which had a non-population-based program and which had no program at all. And this was as of 2016. And you can see quite a patchwork across the EU and the various countries, although clearly moving forward. And different tests are used in different countries. Some use FIT, some were using colonoscopy, some Flex-Sig, some the Guaiac FOBT. And when they took stock of all of these programs, they basically, here were the challenges that were uncovered. There was wide variation in the design of the programs and in the screening tests used. In general, the population coverage, that is the coverage of the target age group, was incomplete. In general, the participation rates were not as high as we would like. And in general, the follow-up of those with a positive stool test, in the earlier years, it was the GFOBT, but now it's, for the most part, FIT. The follow-up of those with a positive stool test onto colonoscopy was not what we would like. And the quality could have been strengthened. And I think when you look at this slide and you see these 5 main challenges that are facing these colorectal screening programs across the EU before the pandemic, dare I say it, that when you look at most colorectal cancer screening programs, population-based, they face a similar set of challenges. So no one country is really getting everything right, I would say. Here's a very nice table, again, from the paper that Hanmo Chu and colleagues published in the issue of Preventive Medicine that Professor Chen showed earlier. And this is a very nice stock taking, looking across Asia, the Asian countries in Oceania, New Zealand and Australia. What screening test is being used? And you can see all of them fit, some 1 sample, some 2 sample. What's the screening interval? Well, some yearly, some every 2 years. This is the pilot in Thailand that Professor Chen has mentioned. This is every 5 years. And you can see, this is the pilot, and you can see the programs are organized. And the FIT distribution method, in many cases, is pickup at a site like a hospital or a clinic. And in some, they're mailed. And here you see the age range in the screening program and the year the program was launched. Very nice stock taking in terms of the FIT screening for colorectal cancer across the Asia Pacific countries. And I think that we can see that Japan was the first to move forward in 1992 with FIT screening. So what about the impact on long-term outcomes? Well, I'll show one slide from Europe, and this is just a nice map from Veneto, Italy, where they implemented FIT screening in some regions. In some areas, FIT was introduced earlier in 2002 to 2004, and then in this lighter shade, you can see that these were areas in which the FIT screening was introduced several years later in 2008, 2009. And what the authors did was assess the colorectal cancer mortality in the early screening areas, which is the dark line, compared with the late screening areas in the dotted line. And this is the time period in this box of the introduction of in the early areas of screening, and this is in which the FIT screening was introduced late. And long story short, you can see that the colorectal cancer mortality, the curve here starts to fall earlier and falls more dramatically in the early screening areas than the late screening areas. And so this was indirect ecologic evidence that the FIT screening in these areas was impactful in terms of reducing the risk of death from the disease. And the second evidence that I'll show is a very nice paper from Hanmo and colleagues that's in Press and Gut, which reports an update on the impact of the FIT screening program in Taiwan, which was introduced in 2004. And what our Taiwanese colleagues have shown here is that there's a significant decrease in the advanced stage disease, and also a significant decrease in the risk of death from the disease. So very nice results from the Taiwanese program. So what about moving forward in the Asia Pacific with colorectal screening? Well, there's a general rule of thumb that once the colorectal cancer incidence, men and women together, approaches or reaches 30 per 100,000, then one ought to be screening for the disease. But it's easy to say that. It's another thing to implement it, as we know. And of course, this depends on the country resource level competition for the resource due from other public health issues, the nature of the health system, how it's funded, organized, and delivered. So it's a set of challenges, and the resource level and the way in which the healthcare and health system functions has a bearing on how one is able to move forward with colorectal screening or cancer screening in general. Nonetheless, for the most part, what we see is that a country can take the decision and can look to other jurisdictions to either adopt existing colorectal screening guidelines or establish one's own, and then consider a pilot, like the nice pilot in Thailand. Often the pilot is in an urban region where the burden of disease may be higher, because the burden of disease is not evenly spread usually across an entire country. Then one can test the elements in the screening program, test the system out, and learn from it, make different changes, and then maintain it in that pilot area, and then expand it to other areas. And that's in general how the screening is advanced. And it's often, as we would say, we have to get all our ducks in a row, and it's often an issue in lining up the public funding. So you need to have on board the Ministry of Health or the Department of Health, Department of Public Health, public dollars, in other words, and all our various colleagues that have important roles, whether it's endoscopists, surgeons, pathologists, clinical chemists, primary care, community care, all of these various important contributors to screening across all of these disciplines, really, and the public need to be lined up and all walking in the same direction. So we always refer to this as getting your ducks in a row. It's non-trivial, but it is an important step. And now, just to end off and link with Bob Smith's presentation, and he's spoken and shown us nice evidence of the dramatic impact of the pandemic on screening. And just one slide from our own program, and here we see the volume of kits per month, and here are the years, or sort of the months of the year. And in green, this is 2018, before the pandemic, of course. We changed from the Guayaquil BT to FIT here, partway through 2019. In June, actually, we changed from the Guayaquil to FIT. So this was the Guayac test, then there's the rest of 2019. This is the FIT test. We saw a nice bump up in kits returned, but here was the dramatic plummet in the monthly volume of kits that were submitted to the lab for processing. Just a striking plunge, and that was made by directive of the Ministry of Health. There was no way around it, and now there's been a slow recovery. And though we're really virtually back to the same volume per month as we were before the pandemic, we have quite a backlog of people that remain not up to date with their screening, and we've had a reduction in the volume of cancers detected. So people with cancer are still out there yet to be diagnosed. So a challenge for us in terms of addressing the backlog. So in summary, in restoring screening post-COVID, I think that there's a tremendous opportunity to strengthen our screening programs and try and align them with the criteria of organized screening. And for those programs where there may be an opportunity to change the FIT cutoff to better risk stratify patients. For some programs in which we're not mailing the kits yet, there may be an opportunity to mail the kits rather than have them picked up. So there are various elements in the design of our programs that I think that now is an opportunity. It's a nice opportunity to think about how we could better strengthen our programs coming out of this pandemic. And with that, I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.